My neighbors kept reporting my trashy yard to the HOA every month, so I measured every violation in their yard and filed a formal complaint for each one. I was standing in my driveway when I saw the white envelope sticking out of my mailbox. My stomach dropped because I recognized that HOA logo immediately. I ripped it open and my hands started shaking as I read the violation notice. Apparently my trash cans were visible from the street for more than 12 hours. The fine was $200, and I crumpled the paper in my fist. My neighbor Gerald was watching me from his porch across the street. He lifted his coffee mug toward me like a toast and smiled wide. His wife Denise stepped outside and whispered something in his ear. They both laughed and walked back inside their perfect beige house. I heard their screen door slam shut behind them. This was the 6th violation notice I had received in 4 months. My grass was too long. My car was parked on the street overnight. My holiday decorations stayed up 3 days past the allowed date. I threw the crumpled notice onto my passenger seat and slammed my car door so hard the window rattled. The complaint started the week after I moved into the neighborhood. Gerald introduced himself by pointing out that my moving boxes were visible through my garage window. Denise left a passive-aggressive note on my door about my wind chimes being too loud. I tried to be a good neighbor and adjusted everything they mentioned. I moved my trash cans to the backyard immediately after pickup. I trimmed my hedges every single weekend without fail. The violation notices kept coming like clockwork every month. Other neighbors started looking at me differently during community events. The HOA president Diana pulled me aside at a block party last summer. She told me that someone had been documenting my yard with photographs. I watched Gerald snap a picture of my house from across the street that same evening. My mailman mentioned that Gerald had asked about my work schedule. The pizza delivery driver said Gerald questioned him about how often I ordered food. My blood pressure medication dosage increased twice since moving here. I started parking in my garage just to avoid giving them ammunition. I assumed Gerald and Denise were just uptight retired people with nothing better to do. I figured they treated everyone in the neighborhood the same exact way. I convinced myself that following the rules perfectly would eventually make them stop. I thought compliance was the answer to ending this nightmare once and for all. Then I started actually looking at their yard one morning while walking my dog. I noticed their fence had 3 broken slats with gaps wide enough to see through. Their mailbox post was leaning at least 15 degrees to the left. I pulled out my phone and opened the HOA guidelines document. Section 4.2 clearly stated that all fence repairs must be completed within 14 days. Their broken slats had been there since I moved in 8 months ago. I walked closer and saw paint peeling off their shutters in thick curly strips. Their garden hose was coiled in the front yard, which violated section 6.8. I took 12 photographs before my dog even finished his business. My heart was pounding as I scrolled through the evidence on my phone screen. That night, I printed out every single page of the HOA covenant and bylaws. I highlighted 43 different sections with a yellow marker. I bought a tape measure from the hardware store the next morning. I measured their grass height at 4.7 inches, which exceeded the 4-inch maximum. Their decorative rocks had spread onto the sidewalk by 6 inches, which was a clear violation. I documented everything with timestamps and measurements in a spreadsheet. I found 19 separate violations on their property over the course of one weekend. My wife walked into my home office and stared at the papers covering my desk. She picked up one of the photographs and her eyes went wide. She whispered 5 words that made my spine tingle. Gerald is on the board. I dropped my highlighter and it rolled onto the floor. He had been filing complaints against me while serving on the HOA board, the same board that reviewed and approved every single fine I received. I drove to the county clerk office the next morning before work. I requested the meeting minutes from every HOA board session this year. The clerk handed me a thick manila folder and I started reading in my car. Gerald had voted on all 6 of my violation fines personally. He seconded the motion for each one according to the official records. I found his signature on the bottom of every complaint filed against my address. My hands were trembling as I photographed each page. I emailed the county housing authority about potential conflicts of interest. I filed a formal ethics complaint with the State Homeowner Association Regulatory Board. I submitted my 19 documented violations against Gerald through the official online portal. I requested that Diana recuse Gerald from reviewing any complaints involving my property. I copied the neighborhood email list on my message. My phone started buzzing with replies within 15 minutes. The emergency board meeting happened the following week at the community center. Gerald walked in and saw my poster board display of his violations with photographs. Diana was holding my printed ethics complaint with both hands. 3 board members refused to sit next to Gerald at the long folding table. The housing authority representative introduced himself and opened his briefcase. He explained that filing complaints against a neighbor while serving on the approving board was a serious conflict. Gerald stood up so fast, his chair scraped loudly across the floor. Denise grabbed his arm, but he pulled away from her grip. The representative announced that all 6 of my fines were being reversed immediately. Gerald was removed from the board by unanimous vote right there. The room erupted with neighbors sharing their own stories about his complaints. Diana handed Gerald an envelope containing his own violation notices, totaling $1,800. He snatched it from her hand and stormed out the emergency exit. The door slammed shut behind him and the whole room went silent. I sat back in my folding chair and finally exhaled for the first time in months.